Welcome to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast with your hosts, Mike Randle and Gus Kearns.
Welcome back to the Screen the Screener College Basketball Podcast, where the train continues to stop at each and every one of the 357 Division I basketball teams. I'm your host, Mike Randle. Please follow me on Twitter at Randle Rant. Today, we go back to the NEC. And since we just talked about Bryant, I think we have to talk about the big rival, Sacred Heart. We have Ryan Peters here, NEC men's basketball insider, covers them for NECSports, as well as Blue Ribbon. We all know Blue Ribbon Preview. Fantastic job there, Ryan does. He has come on to talk about Sacred Heart. He is an alum of the school, so he's the perfect person to talk about the Pioneers and give us a preview here as we look at the upcoming season. Follow him on Twitter at Pioneer_Pride. Ryan, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
It's my pleasure, Mike. And, before we start, I just want to thank you for, talking about the NEC. I mean, you've already previewed Purdue and Gonzaga and Dayton, and you talked to Coach Carm of Siena, who, by the way, is a great interview. I love talking to Coach Carm. So I really appreciate you giving the NEC some notoriety here, because as you know, it's a great mid-major league, very competitive top to bottom. And I think the talent level is going to be improved this year. And I think they may surprise some leagues, in November and December with the non-conference.
Absolutely. There's some great matchups here. We're in the area, Ryan, with Fairleigh Dickinson. So, of course, we're tied into them. They're about 10 minutes down the road. So, absolutely, NEC Hoops, a lot of fun, great conference, and we need to talk more about it. That's what we're doing here today. And we look back at Sacred Heart. They entered this season coming off a big 20-13 year. Anthony Latina done a great job with Sacred Heart. How did the season go this year? Ended up at the end of the year 9-7, lost in the first round to rival Bryant there in the NEC tournament. But talk about the season as a whole. It was helter-skelter. It was interrupted. How'd it go for the Pioneers this past year?
It was better than expected. They had lost some significant transfers, and that's been kind of the story of Anthony Latina. Him and his staff are tremendous recruiters, but they've lost a lot of transfers to the high majors. Whether it was Kane Broom in 2016, he was an NEC Player of the Year. He goes over with Mick Cronin to Cincinnati.
Yep.
Quincy McKnight finds a perfect fit at Seton Hall to play right next to Miles Powell as kind of that facilitator, that defensive-minded point guard. He was an all-conference first-teamer with Sacred Heart as a sophomore. He leaves. And then coming off the 20-win season, as you mentioned, the best Division I season Sacred Heart ever had, E.J. Anasicki, a terrific student, a terrific worker on the court, great work ethic. He graduates after 3 years and goes to Tennessee as a grad transfer. That really didn't work out for him very well. I think he transferred back into the mid-major realm somewhere out west for his fifth year, but that obviously hurt Sacred Heart. So Anthony Latina was going into the 2020-21 season in a rebuild, and expectations were really low. I picked them 9th in Blue Ribbon last year. The coaches picked them 10th. And so for them to overachieve and finish third, they finished 9-7 regular season in league play. I think they overachieved a little bit, especially if you look at the efficiency margins, Mike, but and they also didn't get to play Bryant because of COVID cancellations in the regular season. So if they play those two games in Smithfield, Rhode Island, they're probably going 9-9 in the regular season. But overall, I think a great season for Anthony Latina. And now he's got continuity going into this year. He returns, I believe, 11 scholarship players. He's got 14 scholarship players in this roster, with Alex Watson coming back as a super senior, utilizing his fifth year. And he's just got a wealth of talent, especially in the backcourt. So I think it's looking up for Sacred Heart, as Anthony Latina now has continuity, which is something he hasn't had in previous years due to all the up transferring.
Yeah, and you talk about the players coming back. What Coach Latina has is a group of players who know the system, know the verbiage, and can play together, which I think is going to be a huge advantage, because what we have, Ryan, is all these transfers going to different schools, putting some freshmen in as well. It takes time. Sacred Heart can get off to a great start, and they're led by one of the top backcourts here in the conference, Aaron Clarke and Tyler Thomas. So talk about a little more in depth about those players coming back and why the leadership and the continuity is so very important for the Pioneers this year.
It's going to be a great test case because, you have Sacred Heart, you have St. Francis, PA, you have Merrimack, and you also have Wagner bringing back most of their roster, or at least their top scorers in the league. So, but then you mentioned transfers coming into Bryant. They're coming in, Jalen Benjamin's coming to Mount St. Mary's. Isaac Conte is coming into LIU. So it's going to be an interesting test case to see these teams that return pretty much most of their rosters versus these teams that are kind of retooling through the transfer portal, which is also a wise thing to do if you can do it. But as far as the Sacred Heart backcourt this year, Tyler Thomas is one of the best players in the league. He is a Player of the Year candidate. If he could kind of capitalize on that consistency, as a freshman, they didn't need him because they had a deep backcourt. He kind of came off the bench, was instant offense. Last year, he needed to be the volume scorer for that team, and he really delivered 19 points per game, 5 rebounds. And was the most improved player in the league, led the NEC in scoring. So now he just needs to become consistent on a game in and game out basis, and Sacred Heart will be better for it. And then Aaron Clarke, reportedly he's in the best shape of his life. I hate using that term.
I'll tell you, bro, we just went through it with the NFL. We have videos of people doing exercises that I've never even seen before. Some get injured, some look great. It really is a variable. Social media with the greatest shape of your life is incredible.
Yeah, but with Aaron Clarke, last year as a junior, he was off injured. He had a bad knee, and then Sacred Heart had a COVID pause in early February, and I think the 2 weeks off really helped Clarke because he came back. He was much fresher. He was much quicker off the bounce. He was actually getting to the rim, which is where he thrives. That's his game. Getting into the lane, but also shooting the three. I would argue he's more critical of Sacred Heart than Tyler Thomas. Last year in Sacred Heart's 9 wins, Clarke averaged 18 points a game. Was getting to free throw line a ton. But in the Sacred Heart's 8 losses, he only averaged 9 points a game, was much less efficient. So Sacred Heart, they're 23-10 in the last 3 years when Clarke hits double figures. So he's critical. And I mentioned best shape of his life. He's a lot trimmer. He's lost 15 pounds this offseason. He's really focused on staying there, being consistent with his health and being a guy who's going to be in the lineup every single day. And they need him because he's the point guard. He's facilitating. So you have Clarke and Thomas who are ball dominant guys, but then you supplement them with Mike Sixsmith, who made 54% of his threes last year as a freshman.
Ryan, I got to say something. I'm sorry. If you don't know Mike Sixsmith, you have got to get to see this guy shoot. He ended up going from 3-point range. He was 32 of 59. That's 54%, as Ryan said. He's 91% from the free throw line. One of the best shooters in the country, period.
Yeah, and so the challenge now is he was super selective. So one thing, Sixsmith, he's a great shooter, but he's also got a tremendously high IQ, great court awareness. He's really great at positioning himself both on offense and defense. I love he's always looking one pass or one play ahead. He's got ability to do the skip pass and the dribble drive, the attack closeouts. But now he's got to become more aggressive. He can't be as selective. Last year I believe he averaged only 4.5 field goals per game. He's got to bump that number up to at least 6 or 7 per game, because it's great that he takes open shots and he makes them, Mike, but he's also got to, kind of take the semi-open shots, and because those are better shots than most players in this roster. And so you want him to be a little less selective, be a little more assertive, and maybe take some of the scoring load off of Tyler Thomas and Aaron Clarke and make them a little more efficient as well.
And we talk about the team coming back and where you see them now within the conference. This conference is really coming on strong. A lot of teams you mentioned have had some transfers, some freshmen coming in. Where do you see this team coming in this year? Obviously every coach wants to understate it and they want to say one game at a time. But I think Sacred Heart is a team that can really compete and sneak up here. They may not get high in the preseason rankings. They may look to some of these other schools like Bryant, for example. But when you have this group coming back and you have an advantage, Ryan, inside, I think your mid-major teams that really can hit the boards and play well inside is such a huge advantage because you have veteran guards. You have solid guard play. So talk about the balance here with Sacred Heart and why they are such a difficult matchup when they get going within the conference.
Yeah, so I think the biggest question is, like you mentioned, the front court. So, Contavio Dutrell is one of the best rebounders in the country last year. Had the 8th best defensive rebounding rate, the 3rd best offensive rebounding rate in the country. So he's got a great nose for the basketball, but he's a 20-minute per game player. He's a guy who's going to foul you a lot. His fouls are going to go up a lot per game. So he's a high energy guy. So you supplement him with Zach Pfaffenberger. He's coming off a torn Achilles last preseason. If him and Dutrell can have a timeshare at the 5, I think that's really going to help Anthony Latina kind of sort out the rest of his rotation. The key, though, is the freshman to sophomore jump. You have guys like Bryce Johnson, Nico Gillette, Mattis Spokus. Those guys, they're guys who could play at the 4. And the 4-man was kind of a weak spot for Sacred Heart last year. They ran a lot of guards. Sometimes they'd run 3-4 guards. out there at a time, but they didn't have a true stretch forward, especially at the 4 spot. So I think if Bryce Johnson and Matt Spokus, those are kind of the two candidates who could take that 4th position, be a little bit stronger. Spokus kind of struggled rebounding the basketball. He's got to work on that, but I think Bryce Johnson really has a chance. He's got kind of Draymond Green tendencies. He's very skilled at the 4. He could shoot it. He could stretch the floor a little bit. He could pass it. He could break defenders down off the dribble. And he's also a good rebounder, as we saw in a limited sample size last year. So we already know Sacred Heart's got a strong backcourt. We already talked about Clarke Thomas, Sixsmith, and then Alex Watson as well as kind of a do-everything combo. I think if Bryce Johnson could really step up and solidify that 4 spot, and then you have, like I said, a good timeshare with Dutrell and Pfaffenberger at the 5, I think they definitely can sneak up. And as far as where they project, right now, Mike, I have Wagner and Bryant. You talked to Jake a couple days ago. I have Bryant and Wagner as my top my teams in the top tier, and then Sacred Heart's in tier number 2. You could probably throw in Merrimack, you could throw in LIU. And a couple other teams as well. But I think they're right there. I think they have a legitimate possibility to break into the top 4 of the league in the regular season. And that's really where you want to be, because that means you're going to host an NEC tournament quarterfinal game come March.
Ryan, have they released the non-conference? Because I really think that's critical. Coming off of last year, they have the type of style to frustrate Bryant. Their defense, with that great year they had in 2019, 2020, their defense was number 1 in the NEC in 2-point percentage allowed, only 44.1%. That's what you need to do against a run and gun team. You want to control the boards, you want to limit second chances, and you want to really lock down in the half court. What are you hearing or seeing in the non-conference as they get ready to head into the schedule, which I believe in the NEC, Ryan, this year is 18 games? They're doing the double round robin across the conference?
That's correct, yep. 18 games. Yeah, so Sacred Heart has set their non-conference schedule, and I love it, actually. So they typically, Anthony Latina will do 3 bye games. This year, he's got 2 games that I think they could be competitive in the A10. They're opening the year at LaSalle. LaSalle's coming off a 9-16 season, I think, so they've really struggled. So Sacred Heart, if they shoot the 3 ball well, they've been streaky shooting the 3, but if Thomas, Clarke, Sixsmith, if they could get going from behind the arc, that could be a possible upset brew. And I'm not going to say it's a probability, but it's possible. And then they also go, you mentioned with Jake, Bryant was going to URI. So is Sacred Heart. They'll be traveling to URI as well. So that's a game where they could possibly make some noise. And then they go to Providence, and Providence beat up Sacred Heart pretty good 2 years ago. So I'm not going to, and they have Nate Watson coming back. So I'm not going to chalk that up as a win for Sacred Heart, but they have 3 bye games. A couple I think they could be competitive in, but then they have a really good mid-major schedule. Latina does a really good job of scheduling local teams. So he's got Lafayette, he's got UMass Lowell, he's got NGIT, he's got University of Hartford. John Gallagher has that's a really interesting storyline with Hartford. They're looking to transfer improbably to Division III. So this could be kind of their last hurrah. And I know Gallagher returns a lot of his players from last year, a really good team last year, and they made the tournament and lost to Baylor in the first round of the NCAA tournament. So Hartford's going to visit Sacred Heart this year. So it's a really good, challenging schedule. I think if Sacred Heart gets to 6-6 in that non-conference, that's going to bode well for them. They're going to be battle tested going into league play. I think anything more than 6 wins, and it kind of puts their conference opponents on alert, like, say, this team is for real, because that pretty much means that either they won one of these bye games or they went 7-2 against the mid-majors that I mentioned. And obviously that'd be a terrific accomplishment. So I'm looking at 6-6, and maybe they do a little bit better than that. But I think if they're right around there, I think they're going to be competitive come January and February.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a team that is very dangerous when we get to tournament time at the end. Let's say they end up getting a top seed, like a 3-4, something like that. That matchup that they have with the top seed, they're going to give everything they can handle. I think that's a very strong non-conference, and those are games that are challenging but are winnable. I would not be surprised to see Sacred Heart take 1 or 2 of those games early on. Absolutely. So, Ryan, I'm going to put you on the stand here. I want the prediction. So when we're talking, hopefully we'll catch up. This has been fantastic during the year about Sacred Heart. What are we going to see? What do you think the season's going to hold? And I can sense the optimism, and I have it too for the Pioneers. What do you think it's going to be here at the end of the year for Sacred Heart?
Well, so the challenge for me, in freelancing for the NEC and then obviously writing Blue Ribbon is I try to be as objective as I possibly can be.
Okay.
That's tough. That's tough when you're an alum. And actually, sometimes I feel like I am tougher on the Pioneers than I am
Sure.
if I wasn't a fan, just because, Sacred Heart's had a lot of losing in the past, ever since they became a Division I school in, I believe, 2001. It's been kind of a tough road. And, like I said, Latina's had a lot of ups and downs due to the transfers and whatnot. But I think objectively, a reasonable goal for this team, I think, if they finish in that 3-4 spot in the league and they host an NEC quarterfinal game, I think that'd be a terrific season for Anthony Latina. But the biggest thing now is, and I don't think you probably don't know this, Mike, and a lot of people don't know this, Sacred Heart's actually won the most NEC regular season conference games in the league over the last 3 years. So that kind of shows you. Now, of course, Andy Toole and Robert Morris, they left for the Horizon last year, so they probably would have overtaken the Pioneers, but still, 1 or 2 in the most, regular season conference wins, that's pretty impressive. And it kind of shows you the consistency that Latina's built. The big thing for him now is to win in the NEC tournament. They haven't had a ton of success under Latina. They quite frankly haven't had a ton of success since the 2007-2008 season, when they actually made it to the tournament final and they lost, on their home floor to Mount St. Mary's. Milan Brown's Mount St. Mary's. He's now the associate head coach at Pittsburgh. So I think the goal is really tournament. It's kind of a bust in the tournament. If they have a really good team, they finish 3rd and 4th, it's really time for them to take that next step and make some noise and at least get to a final. Because I don't know the exact NEC tournament record for Anthony Latina, but it's somewhere in like the 2-7 range or 1-6 range. And so they have to be a little more consistent, a little more solid in the tournament, and that's obviously going to make or break their season.
Folks, Ryan Peters just gave you a pretty comprehensive look at Sacred Heart Pioneers, the team that we root for. A veteran team comes back, led by a veteran coach, looking to make that step and get to that conference tournament final again and maybe get over the hump and get the NCAA tournament. This is a team that's easy to root for. Folks, Ryan Peters did an amazing job for us. NEC Men's Basketball Insider, NECSports Blue Ribbon as well. Follow him on Twitter at Pioneer_Pride. Ryan, we'd love to catch up during the season. Sacred Heart, we're hoping for a fast start. Let's get 1 or 2 of those bye games and get it going here for the Pioneers in the 2021-2022 season.
Thanks for having me, Mike, and I'll be very happy to talk with you, NEC hoops or anything else mid-season. Looking forward to it.
I'm addicted to the appetite.